Hello everyone, this is Turin here, and today guys I'm here with another Total War Warhammer online commentary. In this battle I'm going to be playing Bretonnia, and I am indeed facing off against the Vampire Counts led by the mighty Heinrich Kemmler. So this is actually day one of the Old Friends DLC. I actually had no idea it was coming out. I just finished moving over to Poland, so this is actually also the first cast from the wild untamed lands of Poland. So let's go ahead and take a look at the new Kemmler and some of his abilities over here. So I don't think he got any like stat changes. I think he just has this kind of a new summon ability. So if we go to Heinrich over here, he does have the Lord of Undeath. So it's a one-time use. It has 1 minute and 35 until you can actually activate it. So when the game starts, it doesn't start, like you actually have to wait, a full 2 minutes essentially before you can cast it. So definitely will behoove you if you're going to be using the mighty Kemmler to make sure to wait or, delay the battle for a little bit of time so you can get him in the initial fight. So KRELL is pretty cool. We'll also take a look at him once he gets summoned. He does have, I believe, 470 armor piercing damage. So unlike regular White Kings who have relatively low armor piercing damage for heroic units, he's quite the opposite, and we'll definitely make him a bit of a niche pick in some matchups because he is pretty powerful. So as far as the army composition goes, I do have a mostly a front line of battle pilgrims right here, and I think they're a pretty good choice against the Vampire Counts because number one, they deal with fodder, skeletons, zombies, all that stuff very quickly, and they also have very, very high leadership. They're not going to necessarily be able to cut through a front line of Graveguard very efficiently, but when you have the Fey Enchantress with the Mist of the Lady and the Chalice of Potions, and then also a group of Foot Squires mixed in here, that's usually enough from my experience. On top of that, just for a little bit of punch, I do have these KRELL Guardians in the back. So as you guys know, the very meta strategy to deal with the Vampire Counts is Bretonnia, is to get a bunch of KRELL Guardians, well not a bunch, but like 2 or 3 groups, you just charge them in the front line and you just play that Death Star, game with the Vampire Counts, and it's very tough for them to beat, but I don't like to do that like all in. I like to get one group of KRELL Guardians just to really solidify my front line, give me some magic damage against ethereal units and all that kind of good stuff, but I like to diversify a little bit in regards to my cav. So I do have the KRELL Guardians in the front, I do have the Royal Pegasus Knights up in the air. And of course, in my opinion, this is very important if you're not playing the Death Star. If you're playing a Death Star, you don't really want to get missiles because it's just another liability you have to worry about essentially. But getting the Peasant Bowman with the fire arrows. So the fire arrows are pretty good against a lot of different vampire units because, again, units with regeneration are actually weak to fire. So let's go ahead and take a look and see if any of these units are. If he has like Crypt Ghouls or things like that, well... Firstly, the Mortis Engine actually is weak to fire, so that's one of the big things. The Mortis Engine isn't like the most meta pick. A lot of people don't get it in this matchup, but I personally do. I really like the comfort of having that AoE healing, and it's very good at like combating the Fey Enchantress and that Death Star. So I think if you are expecting like a Death Star style of play, the Mortis Engine is a pretty good pick. So aside from that, Fey Enchantress, Pegasus Knights, 3 groups of Men-at-Arms with polearms in the back to deal with Blood Knights, and kind of all that funny business back there. And I actually do have one group of the Mounted Yeoman Archers in the back, so I left them hiding. I figured it was another tool. If my peasants did get bogged down by arrows and things like that, I wanted to have, not by arrows, by zombies, I wanted to have a little something to kind of poke that Mortis Engine that could actually run away from the threats. So for my opponent's army, he does have the Dire Pack over there on the far side, a very good pick against Bretonnia, fast, good against Cav, all that kind of good stuff. So he has some Blood Knights over there. For his main army, he does have the Sternsmen, some Skeleton Spears, the Konigstein Stalkers, if I'm not mistaken, which, actually won't be terrible against, Battle Pilgrims with their poison and relatively high DPS. More Skeleton Spears, he does have a Banshee, which is a bit of a questionable pick because the Fey Enchantress is, obviously does magic damage, and Bretonnia with, KRELL Guardians and things like that do have a ton of magic damage, so I really don't think the Banshee is the best pick, but he does have the mighty Kemmler, and I actually have played like 3 or 4 games, before I decided to start casting when I was testing out my new rig and everything, and I've been seeing a lot of Kemmler, so, I still don't think he's the best pick, but, he's definitely better than he was before. More Skeleton Spears in the back. He does have some Failbats, 2 groups of those, and he does have a Vampire with Shadows. So for the Vampire, it looks like he does have Immortal Servitude, which is the self-healing ability. He does have Pit of Shades and the Mystifying Miasma, which if he uses the Miasma on these guys, it does pretty good DPS, and it slows them, so they won't be able to catch him. So without further ado, let the games begin. So you can see with the Vampire on the far side with the Lord of Shadows, he does use that Miasma right here, which actually slows me down to about 80 move speed. So if he is really on top of his micro and just on point, I won't be able to catch him the entire battle, and he can, potentially harass me and kite and get a good Pit of Shades on like some of my Foot Squires or Battle Pilgrims or other things like that. So right now, my opponent and I are both kind of jockeying for position here. I just sat down here in the valley, and it looks like he's going to be taking the high ground right here. I have the high ground, Anakin. And the KRELL Guardians are going to be pushing up at the front line as well. Definitely want to use them to support the Battle Pilgrims against some of those sturdier troops in the front line. So, excuse me. So right now I do pull the Enchantress back. I did have her riding over there just so she could heal these guys. And you can see these Pegasus Knights are just hot on the tail of this vampire. And if he like lapses up for just a second, they're just going to absolutely destroy this guy. And he might even want to like land it in the front line just to keep it from getting like isolated. So in the back, it looks like he was casting like a Pit of Shades or another Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma. So I actually did decide to move, but it looks like he might have decided to change his mind and cast it at the last second on some of these Royal Pegasus Knights, who do get a really good surround. So it looks like, you know, as you guys have seen, when units do charge, they get a little bit of a bonus, and he actually did use a Pit of Shades as well, but thankfully I was paying attention, and only a few of these poor peasants are going to get caught up in here and, you know, get their salad tossed a little bit. So, you know, I could think of worse ways to go, but hey, they're going here, they're getting tossed a little bit by that Pit of Shades, but as soon as, you know, that's done, I just pull them back, and that was very minimal damage for like 17 or 18 Winds of Magic. So in the front line, we're getting a little bit of fire arrows here on this Mortis engine, which is going to be very good. So you can see it's pushing in here a little bit aggressively. What I would recommend for my opponent was to keep this Mortis engine like back up in the trees and then advance it once the fighting started. That would have forced me to kind of like have to retarget, and it's just more micro all the way around. So he actually decides to land his vampire because it was isolated up in the air. So I did pull some Battle Pilgrims back, which we probably shouldn't have done because it did leave a little bit of an exposed front line here. And in the front, you can see some of these Foot Squires have engaged against some of these you know, various undead units. I think there's some Graveguard in here, but it looks like it's actually just skeletons. So pretty good situation for my opponent because Greatsword units in general, whether it be Chaos Warriors with great weapons or Foot Squires or all that kind of stuff, aren't really designed to fight these type of like fodder units, so it's not going to be the best exchange for me, but still, they're fighting in there pretty well. I do have this KRELL Reliquae pushed up, and the Enchantress is lurking nearby, and she's going to be providing those pretty good debuffs. So over here on the far side, you can see the KRELL Guardians are going to be riding through and are going to be helping to plug that front line. So they charge in there, and they get a nice little knockback on some of these skeletons, and you can see the mighty Kemmler in here is just summoning some troops, and I think KRELL is coming, but I do get a great comment there, which just eradicates like a whole group of skeletons. You can see the Konigstein Shockers actually took quite a beating, so looks like he does have the Banshee in here. I'm trying to see if, where's KRELL? Well, he's probably in this battle somewhere, but KRELL would probably be best suited like right here fighting against these KRELL Guardians because he does have very good armor piercing damage, but here he is, guys. I really wanted to show you KRELL because he is so incredibly cool. I was kind of hoping that instead of being like a summon unit, KRELL would be a hero. So like a White King that you could pick, but you could only pick him if like Heinrich Kemmler was selected. But man, he is just so freaking cool looking. Very Warhammer. He has like a mohawk and giant, you know, epaulettes and just a fat axe. He just cuts that guy to pieces. So KRELL is definitely pretty strong, 470 weapon strength, and he causes terror too. So if I'm not mistaken, traditional or kind of, you know, lower tier White Kings, let's just call them low tier White Kings now, they don't cause terror. So again, it makes KRELL pretty viable. I honestly think there might be situations against like a very heavily armored faction, like against the Dwarves, KRELL is going to be a beast. So definitely going to be a good niche pick for him. But over here on the far side, you can see there's some fireworks going off. Not quite sure what all that was, but the mighty Enchantress over here doing a pretty good job with the KRELL Guardian surrounding this Banshee, which is definitely going to be a very bad day for the Banshee. Obviously, that's a ton of magic damage coming through. Granted, she's not taking that much damage, so a little bit of an odd situation. You can see my opponent's Blood Knights are kind of doing some rounds here, and some of his Sternsmen and some of these other troops are kind of collapsing here. So it was a very good tactical withdrawal, because back here I did have his Blood Knights trapped, so he pulled these Sternsmen as a screen and then got his Blood Knights away, actually. And it looks like he's going to re-engage here, trying to get onto some of these Pegasus Knights who are kind of landed over here. I believe they did surround and kill that vampire, so definitely not going to be a good time for those guys. But the Royal Pegasus Knights in pretty good shape. I did get a regrowth on them earlier, so they're going to be somewhat healthy, and you can also see another fat Earthblood upgraded coming down right here. The balance of power is actually starting to teeter in my favor a little bit, and KRELL is, you know, he's not necessarily in his element here. I think to really get your maximum effectiveness, he needs to be on armor, because again, he does have very good armor piercing damage, and granted, he is going to cut these Battle Pilgrims up. I think Battle Pilgrims do have Frenzy, so they are immune to psychology when their leadership is good as well. So he's not really benefiting from the terror or other things like that, whereas Foot Squires, if he had some of them on the Foot Squire group, KRELL would absolutely annihilate those guys. So right now, KRELL is just basically battling the Enchantress, and you know, I'd actually be interested to do some testing videos with KRELL and see how he does one versus one versus like legendary lords. But the mighty KRELL does fall to the Enchantress. You can see the Battle Pilgrims right here are now turning their attention over to the zombies. Now, it looks like the Vampire Count's forces, they have a Banshee, they have some Blood Knights here who are in pretty good shape, but for the most part, a lot of their like core troops are not doing well. So did he actually, it looks like he actually did have two groups of Blood Knights. So the Blood Knights do charge in and get a pretty good little rear charge on some of these KRELL Guardians, and they're going to do some, you know, pretty good damage. But for the most part, he didn't really have much of a core. Like, he had some skeletons mixed in with like the Sternsmen and the Konigstein Shockers, but I really would have liked to see a core of like Graveguard. But I think he did have two group of these Blood Knights here that I didn't catch in the initial like army overview. But, you know, still maybe really looking to win that Cav engagement. They're going to do pretty well against some of these Pegasus Knights over here, but still, things are looking pretty grim for my opponent, and unfortunately, the mighty Heinrich Kemmler has fallen. And guys, I will try and do a game with him in the next few days, and hopefully get you guys some action with the mighty KRELL. And I would really like to try him out against the Dwarves, because I think that's really where he's going to shine in this particular new Vampire Counts metagame. So Over here you can see the Chalice of Potions coming down, doing a little bit of good DPS to some of those units, but it looks like that's going to be all she wrote for the Mighty Vampire Counts. Basically just cleaning up zombies at that point, but I really do like KRELL. I think he's very strong. Again, it's going to be more of a niche pick. And I know it wasn't the most competitive game. It was a little bit one-sided, but still, I wanted to show you guys. It was just the first game I was able to get some good footage of Heinrich in action, but definitely don't want to be bringing ethereal units like Karen Wraiths. Although Karen Wraiths can be a bit of a niche pick against like against Foot Squires and things like that. I definitely think a little bit less ethereal. Just cut the Banshee, cut the Karen Wraiths, get some Graveguard, because Graveguard are so good against Battle Pilgrims. And Battle Pilgrims are a bit of a meta pick, so most people just get Battle Pilgrims and then use the Grail Guardians to really be the kind of the hammer. So regardless, very well played to my opponent, Lexa. Look forward to you seeing again on ladder, and hopefully you guys enjoyed that Bretonnia cast. Have an excellent night, and take care.